It's the guy doing things, and we are back with episode 26. This week's all about writing. So I contacted one of my favorite authors, Jaco Jacobs, and we had a pretty cool interview. I hope you're ready for it. As usual, if you don't have your coffee ready, pause the episode and go get some. But sit back and relax, and please do enjoy the next episode of The Guy Doing Things. We're high up in the 20s now. Exciting stuff. Here we go. Talking to Jaco Jacobs, one of South Africa's most renowned authors. Jaco, welcome to The Guy Doing Things.
Thank you very much, Thornton. It's nice chatting to you.
We talked beforehand, and I was quite concerned about doing everything in English because you're actually an Afrikaans author. But you got some practice in with exclusive books a few days ago when you had to launch one of your new books.
Yes. Luckily, I did get a bit of practice in. I grew up in a small Karoo town, and my dad used to say, where I grew up, we only use English for self-defense. So I'm going to do my best to defend myself.
No, it's brilliant, and thus far we're doing well. It's the first minute in, we're doing well. But let's get things off and running. So you just mentioned that you're from a small town in Karoo. Where is that, and what did you study from there on?
Yes, the town where I grew up is called Carnarvon, and people often ask near to what, and it's probably it's not near anything, but it's right in the middle of the Karoo. It's a very small town. Yeah. I grew up there loving books, and then after matric, I had to move away because there wasn't many opportunities. So I came to study at the University of the Free State in Bloemfontein, where I studied communication science and did my honors degree in Afrikaans and Dutch. And I was never planning on staying in Bloemfontein, but things just happened, and this is where I'm still staying nowadays.
Oh, that's interesting. That's and from there on, you launched your career and got into writing. But before we get into that, the Thrillers reeks, or they call it Goosebumps in English, if I'm not mistaken. That's where I was kind of introduced to you as a writer, and it was a quite interesting journey from there, and obviously up to now where you write about Zach Berry and all those type of characters. Did you plan on taking your youth writing in that sort of direction, or did you kind of just stumble into writing?
I won't say I stumbled into writing. I grew up loving stories. I grew up in a community where people were storytellers, and my dad and my grandfather, in the Karoo, it's sort of like stories are just lying around waiting to be picked up. So that was the one thing. The other thing was the town where I grew up in had a lovely library. So I read the library through from the kiddies books up to the adult section. And to answer your question, I never... when I started writing and I started discovering writing at school, I never planned on writing children's books specifically. Initially, I wanted to write for adults, and I wrote short stories for adult, for magazines aimed at the adult market, women's magazines, and so on. And then in about grade 11, grade 12, I started submitting more and more of my stories to local magazines, and one of the editors there suggested that I should look at children's literature because he thought my voice, my writing voice was well suited to children's books. Yeah. And so I went back to the children's section and looked at the books that I grew up reading, and the moment when I went back to that, it was sort of like something fell in place, and I discovered, wow, well, this is actually going to be fun. You can tackle themes like zombies and monsters and ghosts and the stuff that I grew up loving. You can actually tackle that in children's books. And the moment that happened, it was like, everything clicked into place, and I discovered, this is the genre I want to write in forever.
Yeah. And since then, dare I say, hundreds of books. I actually read up a few, and I kind of got lost in the list since you started. There's a bunch of them. So that's so awesome to hear, and it's so cool, the creativity that you could explore in this genre. You did brilliantly, or you are doing brilliantly. So just if people listen to this, and I say hundreds of books later, since your first book came out in 2001, if I'm not mistaken, people assume that, if they hear Jaco Jacobs, they're like, oh, he's that guy. And they assume that your first book was this raging success. And from there on, you were on posters and on CakeNet. but what was the story from I believe it's Troetelgedrog? Was that was your first book that you published?
That's right, yes.
And
yes, that was
from that book, was it a raging success, or what happened since then?
I wouldn't call it a raging success. Our local market is rather small. The Afrikaans market is rather limited. So if you sell 2,000 or 3,000 copies of a first print, that's considered a modest success, I would say. Right. And I was lucky enough that my first book sold well. We sold I don't know how many print runs of the book over a few years, but it's like you said, it's not like you're immediately this famous writer and everything just falls into place. It's very, very hard work, and you have to consistently keep at it. And there are very few one book wonders, if I can call it that, in our local market. You have to build up a readership over a few years. I've been at this for close to 20 years.
Yeah.
Since the publication of that first book, and every day you're still working on your readership and working on your books. So overnight success only happens to J.K. Rowling and authors like that. The rest of us have to work very hard at it.
Yeah. And since then, from 2001 to now, what would you say was your favorite book that you published?
That's a very difficult question. It's like asking the father of a lot of children which one is his favorite.
Yeah, I knew it was going to be hard.
There are some books that stand out. A few years back, I wrote a middle grade novel called A Goeie Dag vir Boomklim, which was translated overseas as A Good Day for Climbing Trees. It's also been published in Italian, and I think there's a Dutch translation underway. So in terms of international success, that was the biggest success I've had internationally. Yeah. Also, some highlights for me was when the first time that one of my books got turned into a motion picture. It was a teenage novel I wrote called Suurlemoen, and it was a very strange experience seeing your book turned into a movie. But ultimately, it was lots of fun. When that happened. And then a personal favorite is, a few years back, I decided to write a book of poetry with a poem for every single day of the year. So that the kid can have a book on his bookshelf with a poem to read every day. And that was a huge job writing that. But the book is called Moenie hierdie boek eet nie, don't eat this book. and it was hard work writing it, but I'm still very, very proud of how the book turned out in the end.
Yeah. And this wasn't actually, I send out a few questions beforehand to everyone I do interviews with, but the more you talk, the more I'm interested. But I'll promise I'll stop at 20 minutes. Were you part of the production process of Suurlemoen? How did that work? Did they ask you and then turn it into a screenplay, and then they kind of took it from there, or were you actively involved in that process?
I must say the movie making process is a very strange thing to me. Two of my books have been turned into locally released motion pictures, and Suurlemoen's movie rights were opted years and years ago. I think probably the third company that optioned the rights actually produced it. So the first time that you hear your book's movie rights have been optioned, you're like, oh my word, they're making a movie of my book. And then things just go downhill and you wait and wait and wait and they don't get the necessary funds for it because it's very expensive to make a movie, as you obviously know.
Yes.
So by the time that things really started happening and the movie was really going into production, I decided I was busy writing at that time. I was working on a writing project, and I told the producers, I'm going to let them handle this movie. I wrote the best book that I knew how to write, and I decided I'm going to let them make the best movie of this that they can make, and I'm not going to interfere too much. So I didn't act as a producer. I didn't interfere with the movie. I went on set one day in Joburg to see them filming. And I think that's probably the best way to go for a writer, except if you really, really want to invest yourself 100% in a movie production. It's probably better, well, in my instance, to just give it away and say, you can adopt my baby and you can do with it what you need to do to make the best possible film.
I can imagine that, if you are on set the whole day and they do things in a different way than you imagined, it can be quite frustrating. So I believe the way you chose to do it was, it sounds like the right way to do it, to let them handle it. And then you can be surprised when you enter the theaters for the first time.
The strange thing about movies is you always have this glamorous idea of being on a movie set, and the day that I spent on set, I was impressed by how boring this process actually is. We spent about 2 or 3 hours, my publisher and I, standing in the boys' bathroom watching a scene being filmed there, and they did the same scene over and over and over. The only thing that happened is the main character walked in, heard something, looked to the side, and that was it. And they did that took about a morning to do. So I can't imagine being part of a process like that.
Yeah, I think it would be quite tedious to be part of it. But that's so cool. Having 2 of your books published, and into very good films as well. And you mentioned that your writing career was inspired by your upbringing, but we all know that dastardly word that I actually don't want to mention, but writer's block. What inspires you when you hit that wall? What do you go to now when you achieve, where you sit in front of your laptop, or I don't know if you're still old-fashioned typewriter. These days we don't do that anymore. But if you sit in front of your laptop and there's nothing, where do you go? Do you go into a strange place, or do you phone someone for a memory, or what happens?
I wish there were phone a friend options for this, but unfortunately it isn't. What helps is that the children's book market is, there are a lot of different subgenres within this market. You can write for toddlers, you can write for middle grade, you can write for teenagers, you can write non-fiction, you can write poetry. So if you're talking about children's books, it's not a single thing. So what I tend to do is I write across the spectrum of children's books, anything from books for toddlers to books for teenagers. And usually when I get stuck in that, if you want to call it writer's block, where I get stuck with a story, it's usually because I've been writing the same sort of story for too long, writing for the same market for too long. And then I do a 180 degree, and if I'm working on a teenage novel, I'll go and write some poetry for a while, or I'll go work on a non-fiction project. So to answer your question, usually I'm working on 3 or 4 or 5 things at the same moment, or some things on the back burner. And if the things on the front burner tends to go a little wonky, then you can always fall back to the other projects. And sort of mixing between those, you kind of keep the creative juices flowing, I guess.
Yeah, and as a I can't find the word now, but as an author, as a well-known author, do you actually go to read more if you want to be inspired, or not very much?
I do read a lot. I won't say I read specifically for inspiration, but obviously, every single book or every single book you read or every single movie you see sort of gets stuck in the back of your mind and helps you to understand audience better, helps you to understand story better. So reading is always the most important thing you can do when writing. But I won't say that I'll specifically go read when I'm looking for inspiration.
Right.
I actually don't like the idea of inspiration. Wherever I go, every single day, whenever I go jogging, or whenever I'm in a coffee shop, or wherever, I'm always sort of playing little games in the back of my head, testing story ideas and wondering, what's that person smiling about, or what are those two people gossiping about, or it's just a certain way of looking at the world. And I think if you learn yourself to do that, inspiration isn't that difficult to come by.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for the muse.
Yeah, that golden moment where the sun shines through your window and you that doesn't happen.
No, not often enough.
That leads perfectly into my last question, Yaku. So you spoke about what inspires you, or what not to use as inspiration. How would you encourage others to start writing, or even if they have started writing? Because sometimes I believe you get that when you talk to people, they would say, I'm a writer too, and then you're like, okay, what are you writing? And they're like, just mention they have 2 or 3 projects. How would you encourage them to finish that? Or if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, I would like to start writing, but this or this or this, how would you encourage them to pursue writing?
That's a great question, Thorn. Yes, wherever I go, there's always someone, as you said, working on a project or have something in the back of his head or in the back of her head. And the thing is, you have to go and commit to sitting down and getting that thing on paper. The writing is writing. It's sitting down at your desk and starting with a clean page and getting the first words on there. And they don't have to be perfect. You can just the thing is just to get something down on paper. Your first draft is probably going to be terrible. Most authors' first drafts are unreadable. But just commit to getting something on paper, because the moment you have something on paper or you have something on a screen, then you have something to work with. And it's really terrible how many of these great ideas, I think, actually go and die somewhere because someone doesn't commit to that. I've heard many people calling it ABC. That's how easy writing is. It's apply bottom to chair. That's what it's actually about.
Yes.
So it doesn't, and don't discuss your ideas with everyone. One of my early mentors told me, if you have a story idea, don't tell people about it. Not because you're afraid that people are going to steal your ideas, but because if you're a storyteller, the first person you want to tell that story to is that empty page in front of you. Yes. And the moment you tell someone else, then the story's gone. You've already told it. So what's the use of entertaining yourself by writing it down? And then probably the only other advice I can give everyone is to be consistent. Writing a novel or writing any book is a bit like running a marathon. You have to keep at it consistently and do every bit. So, if you can only do 500 words a day, or 1,000 words a day, or 2,000 words a day, and you can multiply that by 30 days in a month, then you have a heck of a lot of words at the end of a month, and that's all you actually have to do.
That's brilliant advice, and thank you so much for sharing that. That's really cool. And Yaku, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We can get your books on Exclusive Books. Am I right? They can just search Yaku Jacobs and they'll find a bunch of content.
Yes, I'll find them on Exclusive. Yes, they are at Exclusive Books, or any other local bookshop or internet retailer will have them.
Great, that's so awesome. And I shouldn't give your Instagram handle away, or are you happy with people following you?
No, I don't mind at all. I do have a privacy setting on there, but I mostly accept anyone who doesn't seem like an out-and-out stalker or strange character.
Yeah, so that's so I'm going to share it. It's on Instagram. It's at Yaku Zombie, which is such a cool name. I love it. So definitely look on that, and maybe one day I'll find you on the road because we both like running as well. So that'll be awesome. If other people like running and writing, they'll definitely find you somewhere.
That would be great. As soon as I get to Gauteng again, when the lockdown's over, we should make a running commitment and go for a run together.
Definitely, that'll be awesome. Thank you so much, Jackie Jacobs, and we'll catch you in the bookshelf soon.
Thank you very much.
Well, there you have it from Yaku Zombie. If you liked it, go and read some more of his books. Go follow him on Instagram, and we'll catch you in the next episode of The Guy Doing Things, episode number 27. Stay safe. Goodbye.